It's time for my closing arguments in the Scott Peterson case. So this is technically the fourth video. You can go back and watch the others. But what I'm doing is I'm going through the state's motives one by one, just to dispute some of the motives that they thought were the reasons behind Scott Peterson killing his wife. And again, go back to video one where I explained this isn't about proving anybody innocent. This is about me sitting there. If I'm a juror, have you convinced me? So let's talk about Amber Frey as a motive. I think this was their pot of gold. They really honestly believed in the very beginning, oh my God, he's got a girlfriend. This is going to blow our whole case wide open. And actually, if you hear the story from Amber, when you hear the passion in her voice, how she describes their whirlwind romance, how it paints this picture that Scott was sort of obsessed with her, I could understand how the police felt that this was a really strong motive. But again, just like the money piece, I feel like this falls apart pretty quickly, which I think is why they've got to go forward with like bits and pieces of three different motives, because not one of these motives stand alone, right? Not one of these motives are strong enough on their own. They need to kind of combine them all together. So let's talk about what they found out from the Amber Frey motive and frankly, all the kind of holes I want to poke in this one. I've said this in other videos, but Scott and Amber went on a total of 4 dates. They knew each other physically. The first time they met was on November 20th. The last time they saw each other was on December 14th. So this is a stretch of 5 weeks. Now, if you look at the timeline, and everybody says, well, at one point he told Amber that he lost his wife, which is also the same time that he was buying the boat. Okay, we're going to talk through the timeline, but let me just put this out there. That timeline, based on when he had seen Amber, was after their second date. So as a juror, I'm supposed to believe that this guy, who seems to have a seemingly very happy, by all accounts, a seemingly very happy life, a good life. He's good looking. He's making a good living. He works hard. His wife is beautiful. They're expecting their first baby. They're homeowners at a very young age. They're doing very well. I'm expected to believe that he would throw all of that away, murder his pregnant wife after 2 dates with somebody, because that's the timing of it. 2 dates with another woman. He decided, I'm completely tossing out my entire life. So I questioned that. I don't know Scott's psyche. I don't know what he was thinking. I do believe people fall in love very quickly, maybe faster than I ever have. But that feels unrealistic to me after a second date, that you'd be willing to fucking murder your unborn child for a person that you've known at that point less than just a couple of weeks. Now, Scott was given Amber's number all the way back on October 26th, and he never called her. In fact, the woman that gave Scott the phone number kept goading him, like, why haven't you called Amber? Why haven't you called Amber? When it came to their first date on November 20th, it was Amber that called him 3 times the preceding day to set up their first date. So I'm curious if Scott ever would have gone through with this if the friend and Amber hadn't maybe been a little bit more of the aggressors. If you look at all of their phone calls before everything was being recorded, so you just look at the totality of their relationship, according to phone records between November 19th and December 26th, 2/3 of the phone calls that were made between them were Amber calling Scott. Amber's friend Sean, who's the one that set them up, she testified about some of Amber's past relationships. Now, Amber's dating history was not allowed into the trial. The defense definitely thought there was something there, but they weren't allowed to discuss it in trial. But Sean was up on the witness stand, and she talked about a couple of things. So one, there was a boyfriend named, I think his name's Jake or Josh. I can go back and look it up, but she had said that this guy was like a bad boyfriend, and he had harmed her financially, right? Taken some money from her or caused her credit to be ruined. So she had already had that one bad experience. Now, believe me, I have made multiple trips back to the bad boyfriend buffet, and there were times I didn't learn shit from shit. So I don't blame her for continued, repeated bad relationships. But there were others besides Scott. Prior to dating Scott, Amber had a boyfriend by the name of Dave, who told her that his wife had died the previous February. Does this story sound familiar? He told her his wife was dead, and then Amber saw her at a car wash. Now, I don't know if Dave is the same guy who had a pregnant wife or if that's a third guy. I do not know. But yes, Amber's also admitted that there was another time where she dated another guy and his wife was pregnant. I don't think Amber knew he even had a wife or the wife was pregnant, or it could have been Dave who said she's dead. But at some point, the baby is born and the guy leaves her and goes back to his wife to raise his child with her. He reconciles. So again, I'm not going to fault Amber for falling hard for some good-looking, young, rich guy who wants to take care of her. Believe me, I've done it too. But when Scott came to her on December 9th and said, I lost my wife, I know now that had I been in Amber's shoes, I would have blown him the fuck up with questions. What's her name? When did she die? Can I look up her obituary online? Are you telling me the truth? Because I'd already been bamboozled by this same story by someone else. So I probably absolutely would have had the guard up. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. There were multiple phone calls back and forth between the two of them before Amber even went to the police and identified herself. There was a lot of conversations back and forth between the two. What I find curious is there's not a single phone call on December 24th. He didn't call her. And by the way, he had plenty of time. If he's in the truck driving for 2 hours to the marina, why didn't he call her? And she never called him, not once. Now, what I find weird about that is on the 26th, she called him 14 times. So how do you go one day without calling him at all, and then 2 days later, you're calling 14 times? There's no evidence that she knew anything about what he was doing on the 24th or had been a party to anything. She has an alibi. She was found completely not part of it. But let me tell you, the police didn't always think that. The police had asked Amber to record her conversations with Scott. And I said this in an earlier video. The police weren't fully believing, I think, that she was giving them all of the stuff or she was recording all the conversations because they filed for a warrant to wiretap the two of them, their conversations between each other. And I'm going to read this directly from a court transcript, so bear with me that I'm looking over here. But Detective Jacobson, this is Mark Garagos telling the jury this. When he went to apply for the wiretap on Scott, he told the judge that Scott Peterson couldn't have done this alone. Investigator Jacobson suspected Amber Fry and told the judge, I think Amber Fry is involved in this case. I think because Scott Peterson couldn't have done it alone. This is why we need these warrants. And he also testified, and he would testify again from the witness stand, that it was based on everything he knew that had happened up until that point, that there was just no way that one person alone could have done this to Lacey Peterson. There was no way. And that is what Detective Jacobson declared under penalty of perjury. So you have a detective that lied to a judge. Or did he really think Amber was involved? Either of those things are terrible. But you can't have Amber as a motive and then maybe the police saying she could also be a co-defendant or a conspirator. So I think when they started suspecting Amber, that's when the motive moved away from her. Come back, I have one more video for this series.